chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge, text number 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha idam tu te guyatamam pravaksham yanasuyave jnanam vijnanam sahitam tejgyatra mokshase chubat. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you're never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Purport. As the devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars for his realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna and the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. In the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the 1st chapter is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service. And because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they're called more confidential. But matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render a loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now, this first verse has specific significance. The word idam jnanam, this knowledge, refers to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand the science of Krishna. Simply to understand the living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now in the 9th chapter, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. the word anusuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately because they are envious of Krishna. The commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. One who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. So the Sanskrit again in the translation. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, idam tute guyatamam, pravaksham anusayave, jnanam vijnanam sahitam, yajgyatva mokshase shubhat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. So let's begin by offering our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyadyade Satarane. It is said that I believe there are 10 billion verses in the Vedas. And all the 10 billion verses are summarized in the Bhagavad Gita in 700 verses. And out of those 700 verses, the middle 6 chapters give us the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And out of those 700 verses, those middle 6 chapters, the 9th chapter is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And of all the verses in the 9th chapter, the last verse in the 9th chapter, where Krishna says, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, Mame Vaishasi Yuktaivam, Atmanam Matparayanaha. That particular verse is the essence of all the Vedic literatures. Therefore, if we can remember that one verse, then we know it's as good as knowing 10 billion verses. And if we can't memorize that verse, at least we should chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And that's as good as reciting the 10 billion verses in the Vedic literature, as well as reciting the entire Bhagavad Gita. But on the other hand, we should try to understand what the Hare Krishna mantra means so that we can chant it without offense. And here in this verse, Krishna mentions Anusuyave, that one should not be envious of Krishna. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, chapter 7, I believe it's verse 26, it's 26 to 27. Ischcha dvesha samutena, dvandva mohena bharata, sarva bhutani samoham, sargayanti parantapa. That all living entities, they're born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. So Krishna, he tells us we should not be envious, but we were born envious. So therefore, it's not so easy to give up our long practice habits of identifying ourselves with our minds, which sometimes give us the impression that we're envious of others. But actually, enviousness of others is actually simply a reflection of being envious of Krishna. On the other hand, because enviousness is generally taken as we see someone superior and we would like to become like they are. So it's a kind of appreciation indirectly. We generally want to become like someone who has more opulence than we have. If they have more beauty, if they have more strength, if they have more wealth, they have more fame, they have more renunciation, then generally, if we become envious of them, it's because we like to become just like them. As the impersonalists, they like to become Krishna. But also the materialists would like to become Krishna. Everyone would like to become Krishna. Although it's a little difficult because, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in the previous verse, 7:25, I believe, no, 26. Vedaham samatitani vartmanani to Arjuna, bhavishami to bhutani, mam tu veda nakaschana. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything in the past, everything that's happening in the present, and everything that's yet to come. I also know all of the entities, but me, no one knows. So if we think about it, it is very difficult to compete with Krishna. Now, of course, Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita, as I said before, and he's making a lot of statements that are not within our realm of experience, nor can we actually evaluate them on the basis of so-called science. We can evaluate them on the basis of just the words that Krishna says, and therefore we could see them in the relation to our experience. Because Krishna and the words that he's speaking are self-evident if we can hear them, and if Krishna gives us the intelligence to understand them. For instance, it is self-evident that we're not this body. That any intelligent, sane person, when they examine the fact that they have a constantly changing body, but they themselves are not changing, can only come to the conclusion that they're eternal. Because after all, the body that they're identifying with is constantly disappearing, but they're not disappearing.
Guru Maharaj, I'm sorry. Devotees said, many devotees said that your voice is low. Maybe can you more? Sorry, Guru Maharaj.
My computer.
I can hear you perfectly. I have no issues. I can hear very loud.
I don't hear.
Do you have earphones? Did you say that you?
I am in the earphones. Yes, I can hear you very loudly.
I'll try to connect the earphones now, brother.
Because I can't change my computer right now. So, and I'm at the loudest possible. I could change. If it doesn't work, I could try something else, but let's see if it works.
I think Bluetooth is okay. With earphones, it's not that loud, but it's better.
Let's try this. Is this better? Is this loud?
For me, it's okay.
Guru Maharaj, in headphones, I hear you, I think, normal.
Is this all right now? Because I just changed my speakers. Is this better, Dinar?
I can hear you, Guru Maharaj.
Did you say, is this better? Like this?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
So, at least if we hear from Krishna that our bodies are changing, but we're not changing, we can, as a soul with some intelligence, even though our minds may be flickering and our intelligence may be flickering, we at least get some insight into our eternality, the fact that we're eternal. Although Maya, because of our strong attachment to Maya, and Maya is not an ordinary energy, Maya in the material world, Krishna is empowered to be as powerful as he is. Therefore, if we're bewildered by Maya, we shouldn't be surprised because we're not quite as powerful as Krishna is, but to speak of as powerful as Maya. So we're walking around in delusion. And until we come to the perfect platform where we meet Krishna face to face, then we're going to suffer from different degrees of illusion. Still, our intelligence is a little bit of is light, and it sheds light on reality. Now, since we're in illusion, and that illusion is because we identify or misidentify ourselves with these gross and subtle bodies. The gross and subtle body, as I've said many times, has become our deity, the object of our service. And therefore, for a conditioned soul, his body is a hero or a heroine in a drama that's going on. When the body does well, or when people tell us that the body's doing well, when it's healthy, it doesn't disturb us so much. When someone praises it or its activities, when our conceptions of life are illuminating and we illuminate others, then we think ourselves to be practiced on a very elevated platform. And we think ourselves to be quite exalted, all in relationship to this body. Now, it's exactly like watching a movie and believing that we become the hero in the movie. Many people watch James Bond movies. So watching the movie, we may imagine ourselves, I become James Bond. And that I become, although I can hardly touch my toes, but now I can do somersaults. Now all the beautiful young ladies are all captivated by me. Now I become superhero, practically speaking. But actually, we haven't become anything other than what we are presently. This body has not changed. And nor has the soul, ourselves in the body, changed at all. It is simply an imagination. Similarly, our misidentification with this body is just an imagination. It may be a very powerful imagination. It may be an inconceivably powerful imagination. But after all, we ourselves as a spirit soul are not affected by anything that's going on externally. We can be affected by devotional service. The soul can experience transcendental ecstasy and enlightenment by performing devotional service. But mundane activities do not actually change the soul, although they may change the consciousness of the soul. Certainly the mode of goodness is better than the mode of passion for our consciousness. And certainly the mode of passion is better than the mode of ignorance for our consciousness. But our consciousness is not the only part of ourselves. Consciousness can only help us understand ultimately what to do in order to liberate ourselves from our material conceptions and come to the spiritual platform of consciousness. Now, in order to do that, we have to at least accept theoretically that, number one, not only we're not this body, but we're actually eternal servants of Krishna, and that Krishna actually exists. Now, as I said, I think in the last lecture, that in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada mentions that he met one lady in America, and she asked him to recommend an edition of the Bhagavad Gita so she could read it. But Prabhupada said, no, I can't recommend any edition of the Bhagavad Gita, because in every edition, the commentators have given their own opinion. And basically, the opinion that the commentators in most of the Bhagavad Gitas give is that Krishna is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since they say that Krishna is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that leaves it open for us to become God, which most people find very satisfying. That it is very nice, Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita and told Arjuna, we're eternal, so therefore I have a long time to work on becoming God. And in the meantime, although I can't become the Supreme God, but somehow or another, by even practice in this material world, I can become a better God than I already am. By some education, either at an institution, or even learning from others how to steal, then I can increase or other activities. I can learn from thieves, I can learn from professional singers, I can learn from so many different people how to do things better than I'm doing, and getting a little bit closer to becoming a God amongst all the others who are competing to become God. And if I climb on the top of everyone's head, then I can declare myself, I'm the Supreme God. So in every field, people are trying to become the best. There are people who are trying to become the best. Even people who are trying to collect stamps, they become filled with egoism, the fact that they have the biggest stamp collection. And they're recognized within society as someone special. People, although these activities have no actual value for the welfare of others, still these people are glorified because they excel at something, however useless it might be, as something very important, as someone very important. Nowadays, the people are wasting their time in a variety of activities. Even if you become an international grand master of chess, somehow or another, you're given a huge amount of money and recognition because you can move little tiny pieces on a board better than someone else can. But ultimately, no one eats better by such activities. No one sleeps better, nor are there better relationships by being able to defeat your opponent in a more or less game which has no intrinsic value, neither for the soul or even materially. Therefore, if Krishna is God, then everyone's attempt to become God is seen as a waste of time. Therefore, Prabhupada says that if Krishna says he's God in the Bhagavad Gita, then every commentator that's trying to disprove that Krishna is God is a waste of time. Because if they're wrong, their commentaries are a waste of time. And if Krishna is not God, then why should we bother reading Bhagavad Gita anyhow? Why should we read these commentaries? The whole thing's a waste of time anyhow. Does anyone pick up a book? For instance, there are books that say the title is How to Make $1 Million in 3 months. If you find out that the person who wrote the book is a homeless person living on welfare, then who would bother reading such a book? So, if as described by said commentators, that Krishna is a homeless person, that he was born from 2 criminals, Vasudeva and Devaki, who were born in a jail, and that somehow or another he escaped from the jail and grew up in a village where he terrorized the village from the beginning of his life by killing his nurse, who came to feed him, grew up creating a mafia in Vrindavan of thieves who spent their whole time stealing, then began to chase after little girls, even at a very young age, killed many animals in the forest, including a bull, a calf. Then finally he escaped and he entered into a city. Someone was passing by with clothes for the king. He killed him also, just so he can get better clothes. Then he went up to a bow, which was meant for a sacrifice, and he broke it in half. So destructive. And those who were guarding the bow for the sacrifice, he killed them too. Practically everyone he came in contact with, if he didn't like, he killed. Killed his uncle, killed his uncles, killed an elephant simply passing by the arena of sacrifice. He killed that too. Then finally he escaped into Dwarka, and practically everyone who came to visit him, millions of people who came to visit him, he killed them too. At the end of his life, of however you may describe it, he was killed by a hunter. So those who are in this mentality that Krishna is just an ordinary person will see that why should anyone take his book seriously? He's trying to become God, and indeed, no one could have done more harm than Krishna did, killing millions of people, killing animals, killing, stealing, capturing women, 16,108 of them. Indeed, he tried to become God like everyone else is trying to become God. But why should we take him that he's actually, what kind of God is he to do all this mischief? So those who are envious of Krishna, they'll see like that. Or at least we could say that they didn't bother at least to read Bhagavad Gita with the attitude, at least theoretically, that Krishna might be God. Now we ourselves, we're officially Krishna conscious devotees. We even have names referring to Krishna. Therefore, on the outside, we may fanatically fight with people, trying to defend that Krishna is God, but within ourselves, we'll still have doubts if Krishna is really God. Because within ourselves, we're still thinking that maybe I'm the doer. is Krishna doing everything that I think I'm doing? Do I actually have to give Krishna credit for everything I'm doing? This is too much. He wants to take everything away, even my false ego. He's not satisfied just taking my money or my service. He even wants my false ego. He's quite greedy. Even my wife or my girlfriend or my friends, they're very careful in how they deal with my false ego, but he wants to take it all away. So I have to be very careful in how I read Bhagavad Gita, because unless I theoretically accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as accept that Prabhupada is a perfect representative of Krishna, then I can't really derive any factual benefit from reading Bhagavad Gita, because I'll always be doubtful whether what Krishna is saying is actually true or not, is actually worthy in my life of being applied in my life, especially since Bhagavad Gita deals with two main topics, of which are quite sensitive for any conditioned soul. The first topic is how fallen we are. Now, no one likes to hear how fallen they are. Everyone would rather hear how elevated they are. If I gave a class and I said, "Oh, my dear devotees, it's very difficult for me to give this class because your effulgences are so bright, I can hardly see you. And just by seeing you and having your association, I'm learning so much. Tell me how I can surrender to you." And everyone would think, most of us would think, "Oh, this is a very good class. The person who's speaking, he has a lot of knowledge." As Prahladananda Swami said, when we meet with ordinary people, for instance, if we want to distribute a book to them, the first thing we tell them is, "Oh, sir, I am taking a straw between my teeth." In India, this is a sign of humility. "And I'm falling at your feet, giving you thousands of compliments, how wise you are, how beautiful you are, how strong you are, how you're the object of my adoration, flattering you 1,000 times." And then the person will think, "Well, this is a very good person. This is a very intelligent person. He's my devotee. Let me offer some benediction for him. So how can I give you some benediction, my devotee? Well, please take this book and give a donation so you can read it and give up all your nonsense speculations." Now, we first approach someone and say, "My dear sir, you're the ugliest person I met today. Every word out of your mouth is just foolish. And everything you do is a waste of time. Please take this book. It's your only hope." I think today I met the most fallen person in the universe. So I think this book will definitely, you need it. You have no choice. Just give a big donation, because I'm sure you're enthused by my presentation of it to you. Because everything I said about how ugly you are, how foolish you are, how deceitful you are, is all explained in this book. And I'm sure you're anxious to read it. No, the last thing in the universe anyone wants to hear is their false ego being attacked. There's nothing more dear to us in this universe than our physical body. And even if we understand that we're a soul, still we think this body is just a manifestation of my glories. And even if I'm beyond the bodily concept of life, as a soul, I want to hear that I'm God ultimately. I don't want to hear that I'm 1/10,000th the size of the apparent size, and that I'm never going to get any bigger. Of course, as spiritual beings, we are a spiritual body, and the spiritual body will manifest itself by spiritual activities. But in relationship to Krishna, we're always infinitesimal. Although Krishna will empower us in many different ways, but still in relationship to Krishna, we always remain insignificant. Now, the false ego doesn't like to hear that, but that's actually the medicine for getting over the false ego, is to hear about our actual position. So, all right, I'm very small, but I'm beautiful. I'm more bright than 10,000 suns. I'm eternal. I'm by nature full of bliss. So things aren't as bad as I thought they were. So the second thing is that we have to understand how dependent we are on Krishna. That by Krishna's arrangement, we can go back to the spiritual world. And by Krishna's arrangement, we can have a personal interview with Yamaraj and his associates. So that depends upon Krishna where we go. But Krishna is waiting to find out where we want to go. So our dependence upon Krishna has to be understood that we're in our present position not because Krishna doesn't like us, that he's treating us unfairly, somehow or another in some past life, Krishna didn't like my face, and he decided to put me into difficulty. No, we've always been dependent upon Krishna. It is not a new conception. Krishna is the super soul, as it says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text number 15. Nadate kasuchit papam, not papam sikritim vibhu, agyana in every time jnana, tanamuyanti jantava. Nor does the Supreme Spirit assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So the point is, it's our desires that have put us in our past desires have put us into this situation. And the cure is not to become angry that somehow or another the universe is unfairly treating me, because we've created the situation for ourselves. Krishna had no desire to create this position for ourselves, unless, of course, we're engaged in devotional service, and therefore that is Krishna's desire, which we're fortunately dovetailing our desires with. But if we examine our material circumstances or anyone else's material circumstances, Krishna, he never wanted anyone to be in any material circumstance, but because we have free will, Krishna fulfills those desires according to what we deserve. Although he's constantly coming in incarnations, constantly sending his representatives, constantly trying to speak to us within the heart as a super soul, speaking Bhagavad Gita, in order to, we can develop the proper desires so we can become free from our materialistic conceptions of life and ultimately understand how dependent we are on Krishna. Because if we understand we're dependent upon Krishna, then we can actually chant Hare Krishna as much as we understand that. We can understand that. We can, as much as we understand our dependence upon Krishna, then we can chant Hare Krishna with feeling, calling out to Srimati Radharani and to Krishna to engage us in their loving service. That Krishna, Srimati Radharani, their associates, their existence is simply in the realm of loving service. Now, of course, when we understand how great Krishna is, we can call out to Krishna, as we've heard that song before, give me a house, give me a wife, give me a color TV, Om Jai Jagadisha Hari. We can also use Krishna to satisfy our material desires, bless my friends, and kill my enemies. We can definitely do that, but that is not in the realm of pure devotional service. That is not what complete dependence on Krishna actually means. As we know that there are different states of surrender, one of them is to accept things favorable for devotional service. The other is to give up things unfavorable, to always feel oneself being maintained by Krishna and being protected by Krishna. So that's good. Those are very important stages of devotional service. But ultimately, purest devotional service is to have the same interests as Krishna and always feel meek and humble. So we have to dovetail our interests with that of Krishna. We have to go through the whole process, Sharanagati, which will ultimately reveal to us how sweet and lovable Krishna is, and how sweet and lovable his associates, headed by Srimati Radharani, are. And that their attitude is that of complete humility. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is what they call self-abasing. He considers himself insignificant compared to his devotees, that he's a devotee of his devotees. So that is inconceivable to a conditioned soul who's trying to become Krishna, because if he actually became Krishna, then he would become a devotee of all of Krishna's devotees. But that's the last thing someone who's trying to become Krishna in the material world is trying to do, become a devotee of all of Krishna's devotees. Matter of fact, he's trying to do the opposite. And therefore, he doesn't really want to become Krishna. Because he doesn't understand who Krishna is. So as much as we actually understand who Krishna is, then we won't try to become Krishna. We'll try to become Krishna's servant. Because even Krishna wants to become his servant, Krishna's servant. Therefore he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because the highest happiness is not to become Krishna, is to become a servant of Krishna. And a servant of the servant of Krishna. Therefore, in this verse it says, we should give up our envious attitude towards not only Krishna, but towards all the devotees. Not only towards all the devotees, but towards all living entities. Because actually, whether we accept it or not, whether at the present moment we like it or not, all living entities are not at all affected by their material situations. all living entities remain eternal servants of Krishna, no matter how much they believe in it and follow it, or how much they disbelieve in it and rebel against that idea. Everyone is eternally dependent upon Krishna, either to go back to the spiritual world, make progress in that way, or to stay in the material world and try to become Krishna here, or imitate Krishna. So all living entities are unchangeable, but they're uselessly suffering in the material world, trying to do the impossible. That their most valuable and actual real advancement in life, their real interest is to become Krishna's servant, to realize they're Krishna's servant and act in that way. And if Krishna reveals himself to them, then they can equally get Krishna as every other living entity can get Krishna. That the most valuable attainment is Krishna consciousness, which every living entity in all the universes has an equal opportunity to achieve. And once they achieve that, there's no greater gain. And if someone achieves that, he doesn't take away from others' opportunities to achieve the same goal, to get the highest perfection of life. Instead, he becomes a more valuable instrument to help that other souls get the most valuable thing in their lives. Therefore, there's no need to be envious of anyone, but there is a need to try to help people realize their relation with Krishna, give them the greatest gift, which is Krishna consciousness, because in that way we get the greatest opportunity to get the greatest gift also by serving, by having the same interests that Krishna has. In the spiritual world, Srimati Radharani and her girlfriends, they all have the same boyfriend, Krishna. Now, in this material world, where is the example of a group of ladies, they all have the same boyfriend? If that happens here, generally speaking, they all become eventually envious of each other. They become competitors. But Srimati Radharani and her girlfriends, they're all completely in harmony because they have no interest for their own satisfaction. They simply desire Krishna's satisfaction. Therefore, if Krishna is happy, therefore they become happy. And therefore, if someone is able to satisfy Krishna more than they do, therefore they become pleased with that devotee because they're actually adding to Krishna's satisfaction, which is their ultimate goal also. Or Srimati Radharani told the other gopis that my only wish is that Krishna be happy. And if it's necessary that Krishna becomes attracted to some other lady, then I'll go to that lady's house and fall at her feet and become her maidservant and drag her to Krishna so that Krishna can become happy by her association. So that's actual love. And that's the goal of Krishna consciousness. That's our natural position, is to have that experience of transcendental love for Krishna. And by the process of bhakti yoga, as explained here, that love can be awakened. It's a science of gradually following the process and gradually the awakening of our natural identity. Whether we do it today or we do it tomorrow or in 100 years, that opportunity is waiting for us. Of course, we're in Kali Yuga, which is a time of greatest opportunity to become Krishna conscious, as well as the greatest impetus to become Krishna conscious. If you haven't noticed, the material world is not getting any more pleasant than it was before. if in your world things are getting more pleasant, you should tell me and maybe I'll come and visit you. But the whole world is gradually getting more and more degraded, more and more chaotic. And although within the 10,000 years of the Golden Age, there may be some relief for those who take part in the Krishna consciousness movement, for everyone else, Kali Yuga will continue. Just like if there's a big storm, everyone in the storm is going to get wet. It's very hard to dodge raindrops in a big thunderstorm. But if one is fortunate enough to carry an umbrella, at least the person who has the umbrella over his head will not get wet. Similarly, Kali Yuga will go on even during the 10,000 years of the Golden Age. But if we're fortunate enough to understand two things, how we're fallen and how it's necessary we take shelter of Krishna and his representatives who become dependent upon him, then gradually we'll become relieved of the miseries of Kali Yuga. Otherwise, at the end of Kali Yuga, when there are only some devotees left with little pygmies running around looking to eat the devotees, because it's the only prasadam available, then hopefully that's not the time we start to become serious about Krishna consciousness. We should try to do that before that. Or as Srila Prabhupada said, in one interview in one national television, they were asking him, this is back in 1968 or so, the interviewer said to Srila Prabhupada on national television in America that you are describing the difficulties of Kali Yuga, but let me know, where will you be at the end of Kali Yuga with your followers? And Srila Prabhupada's answer was, we won't be around to see all the fun. So let us not come and experience the Bhagavatam, the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam personally. Let it remain a theoretical part of the Bhagavatam as much as possible. And let us try to dwell on the first 11 cantos of the Bhagavatam so we can avoid the 12th one. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Here, Seva.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj, Krishna Chandra Das, thank you very much for your lectures. I ask question in Russia. Хотелось бы немножко попросить вас раскрыть подробнее, как сделать так, чтобы больше следовать желаниям Кришны, чтобы желания Кришны стали моими желаниями.
So Maharaj, I will, for the English-speaking audience, I will translate, right? So how do I do, what should I do to make Krishna's desires to be my desires?
Hear from Krishna and from his representatives what he desires. And then, as it says here, try to see how you could apply what Krishna is saying in your own personal life. And if you apply it, try to apply it, and Krishna will give you the intelligence. How to apply it with your body, with your mind, and with your intelligence and words. And when you experience a higher taste by doing so, when Krishna becomes pleased by our efforts to serve him, and he reveals himself, and we experience a higher pleasure and enlightenment by Krishna's revelations, then we'll become encouraged to hear more, to understand more, to apply more in our lives, Krishna's teachings. And that way our desires will develop and become more and more Krishna conscious. Anything else?
Guru Maharaj, in Zoom chat, a question from Bhaktingaya.
Well, the soul can only be satisfied in the self when it's trying to satisfy Krishna. As much as we try to satisfy Krishna, then to that extent we become self-satisfied. Just like a leaf on a tree, if it wants to become self-satisfied, then it has to water the root. Or if the finger wants to become self-satisfied, it has to provide food to the stomach. So when the soul is completely engaged in Krishna's service and Krishna is satisfied, then we'll become satisfied and our activities will be satisfying to all living entities. Just like we water the root of the tree, all the leaves and branches will get at least whatever water we can supply. So if our service is to Krishna, then we'll become satisfied and we'll be able to help others according to our capacity. Now, the finger, as Prabhupada would always say, tries to satisfy itself, or if the leaves are watered without watering the root, then it's a useless effort. The fingers can never eat the food. They must supply the food to the stomach in order to get the benefit. The leaves, by watering leaves, the leaves will not become satisfied only if the water is supplied to the root of the tree and the leaf be benefited. All right, so I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantharaj, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanand.
Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you.